Welcome back to Movies TV Mad. You can follow me on X at Movies TV Mad and on Instagram and on Threads, you lucky people, at Movies TV Mad X. A very warm welcome to Monday's edition. It's a brand new week here on Movies TV Mad. Yes, Monday's edition of the DC Universe Daily. Now, there's a bit to get through today, so let's begin and let's not waste any time. So, there is a rumour circulating that it wasn't just David Corenswet and James Gunn in Norway. In fact, it was the actor playing the engineer and the actor playing Miss Tessmacher! Miss Tessmacher, right? You got that right, Miss Tessmacher. So, if this is true, what is actually going on? Now, there's no clarification if Nicholas Hoult, who's playing Lex Luthor in James Gunn's Superman movie, was there as well. Some people say yes, some people say no, so it's a bit difficult to tell. First of all, I hope it's not another version of Lex Luthor going to the Fortress of Solitude, right? It happened in Superman 2, it happened in Smallville, it happened in Superman Returns. Not the same thing all over again. So when I first heard about this, I was a bit concerned that James wasn't being original. One of the things I want James to be in this film is original. I've got Superman the movie, Superman 2, Superman 3, Superman 4, Smallville, Superman Returns, Man of Steel. I've got all those films. I don't need you to do that again. Like Zack Snyder did. Be original. If it gets you hate, it gets you hate. But be original, James. Put your own voice in on this movie, and I'm sure that you will. So, if these rumours are true, why would the engineer and Miss Tessmacher actually be in the North Pole where the Fortress of Solitude is? Well, there is a theory and a rumour going around on the internet that actually the engineer gets injured. Now, we don't know why. Now, we know there's some kind of war, somewhere in the world that Superman gets involved with in this movie. Could that be the villain of the movie? Maybe there isn't a Brainiac. Maybe there isn't anything else going on but that war. But we do know the engineer is in this movie. We do know the engineer is part of the Authority, and the Authority will play a big part in DC Universe. So what the theory is that she gets injured. Superman brings her to the fortress, makes her better. So when they actually do the rumoured The Authority versus Superman movie, she tries to educate the Authority that he's not so bad. I think the whole idea of that movie as well will be, and where the breakdown between Superman and the Authority will be, is they will want him to join them, and he will refuse because they do things the way that Superman doesn't approve of. So that's very, very interesting. By the way, I do think James Gunn's going to be very original and put his own voice to DC Universe, and I think that is important. It's not like he hasn't done great CBMs before. I know some people will say they're not great. I think they are. With his own voice, his own personality, and any other issues you've got with him, you've got to push out the room, or you can't watch the movie. I'd rather you not watch this Superman movie or his DC Universe stuff rather than going around making false accusations that you can't prove, right? Because at the end of the day, the stuff that some of you are saying about him, I'll repeat, it's not good, people. And I mean, unless you can prove those things, you shouldn't really be saying them, and you're very lucky you're not getting sued, right? I love the Snyderverse too, but there's a line, and some of you are crossing it as far as I'm concerned. Anyway, so it could be this, that the engineer, that rumour and theory about the engineer being injured and Superman bringing her back to the fortress to heal her could be what's going on there. Now, I don't know what Miss Tessmacher is doing there if Lex Luthor isn't there too. But I've got a huge take about Lex Luthor in this Superman movie. I'm going to give you a hot take. So hot, it burns. It burns me as I say it. Actually, it doesn't burn me because it upsets me, but it's a hot take. I bet you all the money in the world that Lex Luthor isn't a villain in this Superman movie. That's right. And that would be a very interesting take because there's different multiverses, there's different Earths, and on some versions of DC on these different Earths, Lex Luthor isn't a bad guy. He's even part of the Justice League in some comics and some of the animated movies and TV shows as well. So, it's quite possible that Lex Luthor is an ally of Superman, that Clark and Lex are actually friends. Because what you're going to see in this movie, that James Gunn is taking inspiration from different things. And I think that Smallville, he will also take inspiration from Smallville. So actually, I wouldn't be surprised if Nicholas Holt's Lex Luthor isn't a villain or an enemy of Superman's in this movie. Again, it's just a theory. I could be wrong. I'm not saying this with all certainty. But the way I'm sniffing this now is very, very interesting. And although, if Lex Luthor is a villain, I think he is stirring up the Authority to turn against Superman. That could be something that could be happening if he's a villain. And my theory is wrong. So, it is interesting what will happen with the engineer. I think the engineer was in Norway, the actress playing the engineer, and Miss Tessmacher for sure. I think these things, it's a weird thing to lie about at the end of the day. So I do believe that rumour, and I do believe people's theories over, her being injured and Superman healing her, because one of the questions of the movie is, Superman being a good guy and people being cynical about someone being nice, and that's part of what James is doing with this movie. And I do have a doubt that we're getting a Brainiac or some big invasion. We've had the alien threats and all of that. So maybe it's a domestic story. Maybe this Superman movie is a domestic story. Maybe that will be better, although some nerds wouldn't agree with that. Now let's move on to our next DC Universe update. Karen Gillan, who was very much a part of James Gunn's Guardians of the Galaxy, has said she'd love to play Poison Ivy in the DCU. But the Poison Ivy that makes out with Margot Robbie. Oh yeah, please guys, I wouldn't mind seeing you and Margot together. Calm down, Mick. Calm down, Mick. Actually, this is not something I would like to see. I'm just being a bit pervy because I would like to see, who wouldn't like to see Karen Gillan and Margot Robbie making out? It would be a lot of fun if Margot Robbie is going to continue playing Harley Quinn. There's no plans right now for Harley Quinn. Anyway, of course Karen Gillan wants to play the version of Poison Ivy that's in a relationship with Harley Quinn. I don't like this version. I don't like that relationship. But I think it's an understandable relationship because if you were in a relationship with the Joker, you probably wouldn't want to be with another man again. You probably wouldn't trust the man again. Let's be honest. It would be like me dating Kristen Stewart. I'd probably want to date a guy after that. I'm not into guys, by the way. I've told you that before, right? And if I was, I'd be proud of it, but I'm not, right? But I think if you date a nut job, and let's be honest, Kristen Stewart is a nut job from what you see in her interviews. Anyway, right, so I can understand her being in a relationship with Poison Ivy. I just don't like it because there's no drama in it. There's, the relationship between Joker and Harley, it's interesting, it's intense, it's manipulative. It's everything good entertainment is made of. What entertainment am I going to get from Poison Ivy and Harley Quinn together? But as I say, I'm up for Margot and Karen Gillan making out. That will be a lot of fun. I'm joking. Don't get your knickers in a bunch. Although it would be fun to see them together, right? Anyway, now I don't mind this happening. If she's with the Joker first, Harley, she goes for all that, she breaks up with him, and then via the DCU, a natural progression from Joker to Poison Ivy. I think that would be really, really cool as a next chapter. I don't know. I mean, Karen Gillan has been rumoured to be joining the DCU. She's been asked. She said she's up for it. Obviously, James has said he'd love to find a role for her. But at the moment, I don't think there's any solid plans. And just because someone on the internet or in an interview who has a microphone stuck in their face, says, oh yeah, I'd like to play Poison Ivy and I'd like to play the Poison Ivy who's in a relationship with Harley Quinn, it don't actually mean it's going to happen. So they're your DC Universe updates. Oh, and one more, by the way, Peacemaker 2 should go into production in the summer. Now, let's make the assumption, yes, because Jen Holland, who was in the first series and who will reprise her role in the second series, says they'll start production in the summer. Now, let's make the assumption that James Gunn has written this series again and he will be directing most of the episodes, I think. If this starts in the summer, that means he'll finish with Superman within the next 3.5, 4 months. Just imagine, it took Dick Donner 2 years to shoot Superman the movie, not including the extra year he spent with Christopher Reeve to do pickups as well. And and I think because movies barely take 4 months to shoot anymore, because the rest of it is all spent in editing and post-production and recording the music and, color filters and things like that. It's insane, isn't it? I think it kind of explains why movies aren't as good as they used to be. And you're going to say, well, Mick, technology has changed, improved, No, I think technology has destroyed movie making and the quality of movies. I mean, 4 months to shoot a movie. Wow. That means that most of it's done on a computer. That's insane. That says a lot. Anyway, yeah, so I would think maybe by July they'll start shooting, August they'll start shooting Peacemaker 2, which is an interesting project because, the first series is set in the DCEU and the new series is set in DC Universe, which James has clarified. Peacemaker 1 won't be canon to Peacemaker 2, which is interesting. So we'll see how he's going to explain that, and that's very, very exciting. Now, that's the end of your DCU updates. We're not going anywhere yet. We're going to stay here for another good 17 minutes. So relax, get yourself a cup of coffee, because yes, I'm sorry to upset some people, we're going to talk about Zack Snyder again and his wish, his big dream to do one last DC movie, and that's The Dark Knight Returns. Now, some will be desperate for Zack to finish what he started. It looks like, from what he's saying, he'd be satisfied just to do a Dark Knight Returns adaptation. So I think he's happy to sacrifice the rest of it to do this, because that's the DC comic he loves. That's the Batman comic he loves. He loves deconstructive comics, right? And it's not like I don't like deconstructive stories. They're interesting, but deconstructive stories only work if you're reconstructing the characters again. I mean, Watchmen's an interesting story because I don't feel Watchmen really tries that hard to reconstruct those characters because they were never constructed in the first place. They were, those characters, are fucked up heroes in a fucked up world. It's a kind of Hollywoody, corrupt, where women are abused and raped, where the heroes are heroes, but they're not good people. It's like all the people we look up to in the entertainment industry. We may look up to them, they may be good at their jobs. Well, no, not anymore, but they're not good people. I mean, that Hollywood is dirty, guys and girls. It isn't what you think it is. Dirty. I mean, everyone wants to be famous, but the sad thing is, once people are famous, they don't want to be famous anymore because, yeah, it's a catch-22 situation. If you know, you know. But The Dark Knight Returns is a very interesting story that Zack's in love with, and I think it would make a great movie. Now, what's interesting about this is he took a lot from The Dark Knight Returns with Batman vs Superman: Dawn of Justice. So, how does he do this? Let's just say he does it. It's very, very unlikely they allow him to make this movie. But what is interesting about this is that they are desperate for money, and I think he's kind of saying in a way, and I've mentioned this before in my videos as well, that he's kind of saying to them, look, if you let me make this movie, I'll never talk about DC again. I'll leave you alone. Because just look at what happened once he went on the Joe Rogan podcast. What happened? All hell broke loose. He's trending. People are being negative to each other, right? As I said the other day, all the positive work that James Gunn's done has gone down the toilet. Everyone's talking about Zack Snyder and not James Gunn. That isn't a good thing. DC Studios and WB cannot be happy about this. But if Zack Snyder was announced to be making, a Dark Knight Returns movie, all hell will break loose on the internet anyway. Is it what they want? Is there any scenario where Zack Snyder gets to do this? I don't know. Listen, it's very, very unlikely. The chances of it are so small. But he wants it. He wants to make this movie. There's no question about that. People say to me, Zack's done with DC. He's not done with DC. But DC, WB certainly want to be done with him. Unfortunately for them, he has made 4 DC movies, including Watchmen. He's always going to be connected to DC. Every interview he does, every promotion for a movie, Rebel Moon 2, whatever, he can bring up DC and it brings that conversation back. What WB don't want is people reminded of his films, right? Because they were divisive. At the very least, they were divisive. Whether you're like me, who loves his DC movies and loves the Snyderverse of the DCEU, it does create that negativity every time people hear his name mentioned. People just seem to lose all logic and, their good senses. Half decent people you see on the internet just go mad when they hear the word Snyder. What? Did you just say Snyder? Oh, not him! I don't know why. Normally people are fine. You can agree with people like 97% of the time. Then all of a sudden, the name Snyder comes up and everyone loses their shit. It's actually hilarious how they always take his bait. But, yeah, I think if he gets... Look, personally, I'd love to see Zack Snyder's adaptation of The Dark Knight Returns. That graphic novel is amazing and it's got a great version of Robin as well. But there's lots of levels about that film as well, because he does fight Superman in that movie. And Superman is kind of an agent of the status quo in that movie. In a way, he's kind of the enemy. My issue is, haven't you really kind of adapted The Dark Knight Returns with Batman versus Superman? I mean, what are you going to tell us that's different in this movie? And I know The Dark Knight Returns is different. It's interesting. And I think that's the thing. Batman versus Superman Dawn of Justice was kind of your adaptation of The Dark Knight Returns. Now, let's forget the fact that it's very unlikely that Zack Snyder gets to do this. Forget that. My point being is, hasn't he already done it? And as I say, I'd love to see it. I'd love to see it. I don't know if there's any point in seeing it. I don't know if there's any money in seeing it. But it certainly will be an interesting film. Because it is different. I mean, look, the story of The Dark Knight Returns is way different to what they did with Batman vs. Superman, Dawn of Justice. It's a very different time. Now, yes, it is about an older Batman. That's something, he took from The Dark Knight Returns for BVS. There's no question about it. But this, he's a lot older, I think, in The Dark Knight Returns than he is in BVS. I think Affleck's about what? Early 50s, late 40s. I mean, Affleck looks amazing. He don't look like an old and past it Bruce Wayne. I know he's drinking and he's taking the painkillers and that's supposed to show us how he's struggling, but he looks like a very capable Batman. Yes, they put a little bit of grey in his hair, blah, blah, blah. The truth of the matter is, I think you would need an actor who is naturally older, naturally in their 60s, maybe they put a bit of weight on, I would like to see that kind of thing done. If you're going to do that, then it's very, very interesting to me. I mean, for example, I don't think it would be wise to bring Ben Affleck back as the Batman from The Dark Knight Returns, unless he's 70 years old in 17 years' time or something like that. But I think you need an older actor, someone that we actually see as older. And I think someone in their 60s would be perfect. Who would be a really, really good, and I don't know how old this actor is now, and this is someone Zack's worked with. Russell Crowe as Batman and Bruce Wayne would be fucking amazing. He's around the good age, right? And I think Russell kind of looks his age. He doesn't look horrible enough. I think the man looks good. I don't want you to misunderstand me. Don't come and find me, Russ. You know I love you. But, and he was amazing in Man of Steel, wasn't he? And, you know, Gladiator. He's an amazing actor. But I think Russell, and I think there is a kind of ferociousness about Russell Crowe. And I think he would be a great Batman Bruce Wayne for The Dark Knight Returns. What do you think of Russell Crowe playing Batman and Bruce Wayne in a Zack Snyder Dark Knight Returns adaptation? Because I think it would be really, really cool. And I'd like to see this happen. I really would. Because, as I say, it's a really good story. It's a shame he kind of has partially done it, but it's not a faithful adaptation, and he's only throwing a few things in there. So it's very, very different. And yes, BVS is about an older Batman. He was inspired by that element of The Dark Knight Returns. But I think if you're faithful with The Dark Knight Returns, you can make a really compelling story. What it has to be is a standalone movie. That's it, because it's a standalone story. You do it as standalone, and then he will walk away. But there will be so many people, so many nerds who say, no, there's no way we want Snyder going anywhere near this. And James Gunn won't want this. Now, the only one who may think, because Zack keeps on going on about adapting The Dark Knight Returns. Just, as I say, just because someone says something while they've got a microphone in their face, and he said it repeatedly, by the way, that he wants to adapt The Dark Knight Returns and he'll be done with DC. As I said the other day, is it a threat, Zack, or a promise? It's like he's saying to them, just let me do this and I'll leave you alone. I'll leave you in peace. I'll stop stirring the shit. Because he likes stirring the shit. And it's funny and I love it. I'm here for it. It's funny. I mean, as I said the other day, it's really fun to see all the old Snyderverse fans come back to X and talk about what they loved about the Snyderverse. It's great to see those people back and, you know, the people I stood with to, you know, help release the Snyder Cut. And I think there's so many, you know, I think Zack's a brilliant director. I think he's a brilliant guy and I love his movies. And I know that's not the kind of the opinion, but I know there's a lot of people who love Zack like I do and admire his films and has a great eye. Some people say he's even got two. But I think he would make an outstanding, you know, The Dark Knight Returns. I think it would be an amazing story. It's something, look, and also with Snyder, we know this is a graphic novel he knows really well. And it is a deconstructive story, there's no question about it. And it's the kind of story that people kind of, I mean, it's funny with The Dark Knight Returns, it's a very, very popular graphic novel. But, you know, if this was ever to happen and Zack was to do this, this would be, you know, it would bring a lot of toxicity back. But just because you don't like something, you know, it doesn't mean it can't happen. You know, is there money in this? I don't think any publicity is bad publicity. If a guy is trending, as he's done, because he's been talking about, you know, a movie he did 8 years ago. And I mean, he didn't just talk about DC, he spoke a lot about his daughter on the Joe Rogan podcast. Probably spoke more about his daughter than he did about Batman and DC. But of course, what people are focused on the most negative thing, because we live in that society, and that's a shame. That's why there's really successful YouTubers out there and, you know, people on social media, because they talk negative. They know how to get you to interact and suck you in. And that's how it works. That's the way of the world. It's a very sad world that's how people become successful. It's not something I've learned to be able to do or something I feel comfortable in doing, because it's so disingenuous, isn't it? And then you've got to put up with all the hatred. And life's too short, isn't it? Life's too sweet. I'm 51, man. So, yeah, would you like to see a Dark Knight Returns movie written and directed by Zack Snyder? A faithful adaptation of this graphic novel. Do you like this graphic novel? Do you love this graphic novel? Is it not for you? If you do love this graphic novel, do you think Zack Snyder is the right person to bring it to life? Look, I understand there's zero chance of this happening, but something about this industry that's very interesting. And one of the nice things about it is that you never know what's going to happen. Who thought the Snyder Cut was ever going to be released? Even us lot who were fighting for it on a daily basis, and every day there was, I mean, I've been thinking about this the other day. You know, the discourse around DC live action is like the biggest of soap operas. It is. You've got people on both sides arguing on a daily basis, all these histrionics I mean, there hasn't been a quiet day on the internet since Smallville. Since the Smallville pilot, there's always been something to talk about. We've had Smallville. We've had Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy. We had the Green Lantern flop. I like elements of that movie, especially on OR. I thought that was done very, very well. Superman Returns, the DCEU, Joker, the Suicide Squad. You know, there's so many things that we've been through ever since the year 2000 in terms of DC. And there's the drama. It's like a never-ending soap opera, isn't it? There's never a quiet day when you're covering DC, and I've been covering DC since the summer of 2018 on this platform and on this channel. And as I say, I've not had a day where I'm thinking, oh, what am I going to talk about today? Maybe I shouldn't do a video today because there's nothing to talk about. You don't get days like that within DC. There's certainly, if we woke up one morning to find out that Zack Snyder was making a Dark Knight Returns movie, adapting it, you know, it would be insane. And, you know, the discourse would be all over the place. But it's something I'd very much like to happen. In my heart, I would like to see, you know, Justice League 2, Justice League 3, Batfleck's Batman movie, and also a Dark Knight's Return. Why can't I say it anymore? I'm saying it isn't Dark Knights, it's bloody hell, Dark Knight Returns. Right. What's wrong with me? It's Sunday. I'm hungover at the end of the day. Please excuse me. But yeah, I'd like to see it all, you know, inject it in my veins. But let's be realistic. We ain't never getting a Justice League 2 and Justice League 3. I know we got the Snyder Cut, but that's different. We're never getting, I don't think we'll ever get a Dark Knight Returns, you know, movie. I just don't. You know, I can't see it happening. I mean, I'm for it. I want it to happen, but I just don't see it happening. I just don't see how it happens. And, you know, unfortunately, Zack is just too different. Not for me, not for you who love him, but for everyone else. He's just too different. He's too bold. He's too unique. I mean, you watch a movie like Batman versus Superman Dawn of Justice, and you think to yourself, Jesus, this guy's got cojones for making this movie. And you think no other director has got the guts to make a movie that says what this movie says. I mean, you look at the explosion at the Capitol building, then you look at what happened after the American presidential election of a few years ago when they attacked the Capitol offices or whatever happened there. I mean, it wasn't an explosion, but people were attacked, people were injured, people died, right? And it's interesting, isn't it? It's like, in a way, Snyder predicted what happened there. And it's all through hatred and division. And that's what Batman vs. Superman is talking about. And then we get the division about the movie outside of the movie as well, which is insane. So Snyder made, for me, an amazing movie that speaks a lot about division and hatred, but then embracing love and believing in someone and giving someone a chance. And that's what happens to Batman. He's illuminated by Superman at the end, and that sacrifice inspires him. And, you know, that's what it's about. And that's what Snyder's trying to say. He's not trying to say that it was good, that it was branding. I didn't actually realize that the whole branding was taken from Zorro, because Zorro branded, you know, the villains, didn't he, in his stories? And he loves Zorro, and he was saying in his BVS commentary that the reason Batman is branding in BVS, or one of them, he took that, you know, as to be kind of an Easter egg for Zorro. And I thought, wow, yeah. And I just thought about it because I was a big fan of Zorro as a kid as well. I mean, basically, Batman is ripped off. I mean, really, Bob Kane is probably the biggest plagiarizer of all time. And I think a lot of the ideas for Batman were swiped from Zorro, and I think most of the originality did come from Bill Finger, whose name was hidden for a long, long time. But this is what happens in creativity and art. Sometimes the people who come up with the ideas, you know, get their ideas stolen. I mean, the biggest lesson I learned is don't pitch things to these big organizations. With the internet today, you're better off getting one handheld camera, making your series, making it as cheaply as possible, making your movie, setting up a YouTube channel and putting your movie on there. And if it's any good, people will notice it. I think that's going to be the future. And I think even though we keep on saying we've got to fight for cinema, I do think that the future is going to change. And I think creativity will be people who come on the internet and become creative. Because technically, because of the internet and YouTube and other places like this, there's a place for people to be creative and show that they are talented without having to pitch to Hollywood. Because Hollywood is dying a slow and painful death. So what do you think? Would you like to see a Dark Knight Returns adaptation? Do you think Snyder is the right person for it or the wrong person? I would love to see it.